Psalm 55:6 says, "Oh, that I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and be at rest." In this day and age, the ability to fly like birds is a dream that is fulfilled by many passionate pilots who do what they do out of their simple love for it. As for myself, I want to fly in the commercial airlines for many reasons. Having the lives of numerous people in their hands is a fear that keeps many people from pursuing commercial aviation. But I see it as an opportunity to represent the mindset of Christ through protecting the lives of those behind me at all costs. Being a pilot is a highly respected occupation because it is a difficult job that requires incredible amounts of training in order to protect the lives of the passengers behind them. I want to be a pilot because I feel that it is my calling, and it is the best area for me to exercise my skill sets. Not only so, but there's a beauty that only a pilot can see from the cockpit of an airplane. The truth is, very few people will see what I have seen and will continue to see so much more of for the rest of my life. The reason I believe so few people have an interest in flying is because of the long and challenging road required to get there. An average of 15 million flights depart every year, and an expected but nevertheless widely concerned issue is in the uprising, a shortage in pilots. Now there are two main factors that play into this. There are many older pilots, specifically the generation of Vietnam War vets, that are nearing their retirement, and there are fewer younger people who are interested in the industry. Another reason why I feel led to do this is because the aviation world needs capable young men and women to join it in order to keep it running. I believe the reason that so few people have an interest in the industry is because they lack the experiences that caused me to fall in love with it. Over the last 8 months, I have flown in the cockpit of 2 different airplanes, one of which was a Cessna, which was a small 4-seat single-engine plane that is typically used for training, and the other was an executive corporate jet. My flight in the Cessna was a discovery flight, as they call it, which is an opportunity to go up in a plane with a flight instructor and essentially get a glimpse of what it's like being a pilot. So I headed out to Centennial Airport one Friday morning last August, where I met my flight instructor, Nick Archer, who led me through the list of the pre-flight check. Once this was completed, the fun and my first experience of the beauty began. I was allowed to taxi the plane to the runway, which at the time I felt totally unqualified to do. But as soon as we reached the runway, we prepared to take off into what was the determining factor of whether I would actually pursue aviation or not. The second the wheels of that little Cessna left the runway, the feeling of a takeoff from a pilot's position just put an uncontrollable smile on my face that pretty much remained there until I left Centennial later that morning. At one point, Nick and I were flying over downtown Denver at 8,000 feet in elevation, which, as you can imagine, is just an incredible sight to see. And I'll be honest, I was not completely thrilled about going on this flight beforehand. I thought to myself, well, I'll see how it goes. If it's good and I enjoy it, then I'm in. But if it's not, I suppose I'll just have to find something else to do with my life. But as we were flying over Denver and headed towards the foothills, I remember telling myself, wow, this is really something I could get used to. It was well before the halfway point of that 45-minute flight where I was just filled with so much excitement for flying. And I remember saying a brief prayer that went along the lines of, God, I really hope this is what's in your plans for me. And that was when I felt like I had completely made up my mind that I was going to fly for a living one day. Well, the flight in the Cessna was really just to see if I would even enjoy aviation at all. My flight in the corporate jet was a whole different experience that really opened my eyes to the true beauty of aviation. I was talking to my dad one evening, who is a physician at Swedish Hospital, and he mentioned a conversation that he had had earlier that day with one of his patients who flies a very nice private jet for a dental company. What I did not expect was when he said he would like to take you on a flight to Phoenix and back with him sometime soon. So the next thing I knew, I found myself driving back out to Centennial Airport where I met Captain Wary, his name is, at the TAC Air Executive Terminal, where I was introduced to the first private jet that I would ever fly in. Never would I have thought that I would ever fly in a private jet, but much less in the cockpit of it for my very first time. But there I was, following the same procedure with Captain Wary that I did with Nick Archer on my Discovery flight. After a very in-depth tour of the plane, I was tasked with helping with our preparation for our flight to Phoenix, Arizona. Words can hardly describe how thankful I am for this experience because, honestly, there is still a point between my Discovery flight and this flight where I questioned whether or not flying was something that I really wanted to pursue. Now, backing up to the beginning of senior year, all of the seniors were taken up to a campsite past Gunnison, Colorado. We knew beforehand that we were going to be taken to a random location and dropped off one person at a time and given a small area to stay for 8 hours one day. So, while I was sitting on a wet and very uncomfortable log in what felt like the middle of nowhere, I had more than enough time to think about what I truly want in this life, because I was given 8 hours to do nothing but that. However, upon a considerable amount of time spent in thought and in prayer, specifically about flying and my pursuit of it, I finally heard a voice in my head. But this was not necessarily the voice that I wanted to hear by any means. In fact, it was quite the opposite. There was this voice in the back of my head that was telling me, "You may not make the best pilot. Maybe this thing isn't really for you." I quickly realized, though, that everything we truly want and love in this life is worth fighting for, and usually that is the only way to keep them. Well, I interviewed a man by the name of Captain Dan Griffiths, a close family friend of ours and a pilot for Delta Airlines. He taught me what it means to be a Christian pilot in the industry, as well as his personal experiences with the beauty and challenges of his job. After what I thought would be a pretty casual 30-minute interview, I ended up walking away with principles that will stick with me for the rest of my life as long as I pursue aviation. First off, being a Christian pilot requires integrity. Captain Griffiths warned me that a lot of young male pilots especially tend to get into trouble with things like partying, sex, alcohol, and the like while traveling around the country and even the world. While I personally do not see these things as temptations that I will struggle to avoid, the devil is deceptive when we let our guard down, and Captain Griffiths told me that I have to show impenetrable integrity in the world of aviation, or the values that I hold on to so tightly now can so easily slip away. Another thing that Captain Griffiths told me is the road to the commercial airlines is a very long and tiresome process. It used to be, before I was around, only 250 hours were required to obtain a commercial pilot certificate, which was enough to get hired in most airlines. However, because things are different now, 1,500 hours are required to obtain a commercial license, and even that in itself is not quite enough to get hired by most companies. I'm not expecting flying to be a total walk in the park, but based off of what I have been told by every pilot that I have ever spoken to, flying is very enjoyable more often than not. Here are just some of the things that Captain Griffiths told me make the job worth the work. First off, it pays fairly well. As of 2018, the average commercial pilot makes approximately $130,000 annually, which can easily go up as pilots continue to retire, thus the demand gets higher. Another thing Captain Griffiths told me is that you get to wake up in the morning and walk out to a $30 or more million machine and get paid to fly it. Now, there is one thing that he told me, and that's that I have to go into the commercial airlines with the expectation that I will have to sacrifice time with my family in order to support them. But he almost couldn't believe that he gets paid to do what he does. So Captain Griffiths got me very excited and looking forward to starting my career. Now, fast forwarding to February of 2019, I knew that I had to have another component completed for my Capstone experience. I knew there was one other pilot who I knew I could interview if he had the time to do so. After one of my baseball games in my junior year, I was introduced to Captain Mike Esper. Fortunately for me, as soon as I contacted him about interviewing him, he was very willing to help me get in this interview before the deadline hit. So I asked Captain Esper all of the same questions that I asked Captain Griffiths, and I received two very similar stories and pieces of wisdom from both of these incredible men. However, when I asked Captain Esper what the challenges of his job flying in the commercial airlines are, I did not expect the answer that he gave me. He said, when you look at the technical stuff, everybody can fly. And I thought, hold on a minute, everybody can fly? I thought this is challenging, and that's why so few people want to do it nowadays. But he said, anybody can operate an aircraft, but it is the personality side of things that really determines who can and cannot be a commercial pilot. When he's looking at a new hire, he knows that he or she got there because they have sufficient hours and they know how to fly a plane. But there's that personality aspect that plays a huge role in who gets hired and who doesn't. When he said this, I had the thought running through my mind, is my personality good enough for this thing? How am I going to know that I qualify? One thing I do know, however, is that I have no problem dealing with people, even the very difficult ones, which is important in the commercial airlines. I am aware that I will be spending hours upon hours locked in the cockpit of an airplane with pilots that I may or may not know. I most likely will not like all of them, and they most likely will not all like me. Yet there is one thing that I have seen in both Captain Griffiths and in Captain Esper, and that is love. 1 Corinthians 16:14 says, do everything in love. And while I simply do not do this perfectly by any means, I can say that I generally love people, and I do my very best to be respectful to everyone. Well, at the very end of our interview, I told Captain Esper that I still have one more component to complete to finish off my Capstone experience, and that is the service component. I asked him if he had any ideas at all of what I could do, and being who he is, he immediately offered for me to shadow him at his job, where he trains frontier pilots and runs simulators with them. And I once again want to thank you so much for that opportunity. It was truly very beneficial to me. But anyways, I drove out to Aurora one Sunday afternoon, where I met Captain Esper at the front doors of this incredible facility. I first received a tour of the building, and let me tell you, I didn't really know what to expect. But as we were walking through this building, I saw all of these smaller simulators in individual rooms, but I had no idea what was coming next. Once we turned the corner, I saw this huge, incredible machine that I knew had to be like the real deal. I asked Captain Esper about this machine, and he said it is by far their most advanced simulator worth millions of dollars. Once again, I was just fascinated by aviation. Well, a few of his students showed up and took a little over an hour-long quiz. And sitting in on this made me very nervous, but actually quite humbled. It was kind of funny to me just realizing how much I don't know, because the language that these pilots were using with each other was so foreign to me that I could hardly understand any of the terms that they were using. It was just kind of funny to me. In fact, on our spring practicum missions trip to Honduras, some of the members of my group were asking me if I could fly the plane if the pilots randomly died or something, and they're asking me how good the landings were and whatnot. And I couldn't help but laugh, but there's also a little bit of fear in that laughter, because it made me realize how long of a ways I have to go in order to become a pilot who can determine, or who can judge the quality of those landings, and who can fully operate an aircraft. With all of this being said, I am very grateful for all of the experiences that I have had over this last year. The reason I'm so grateful for these experiences is because they hit me with a sense of motivation to finish out my senior year strong, so that I can finally pursue flying and experience it in its fullest. This all goes to say that although I have so many things to learn and so many skills to develop, I have learned a lot about what it means to be a Christian pilot specifically over this last year. Something Captain Esper told me during our interview is you gotta pay your dues. You have to pay your dues. Being a Christian pilot in the industry is not an easy task, but I'm grateful to know this now because I believe it will help me avoid hardship in the future. So going into piloting with a mindset that is prepared to endure hard work and difficulty is what I believe will prevent me from wanting to quit when times get tough. This is not to say that I am worried about flying by any means, because I'm truly very excited. I am beyond ready to see what God has in store for me in the world of aviation. 1 Peter 4:10 says, "As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another, as stewards of God's varied grace." Throughout all of the doubt that I've had in myself in the past, it was my senior year of high school where I finally felt a calling from God to do something that He specifically created me for. Looking back over this last year, I can say that I'm beyond content with the progress that I have made, which has gotten me to the point where I'm currently at. Like I said, I have so many things to learn, but I'm extremely excited to learn and grow and work towards a position where I can build God's kingdom and minister to those in the industry who may not know Christ. I'm at peace knowing what college I will be attending, which is Metropolitan State University of Denver, where I will study aviation and aerospace science. I have already chosen a flight school, the one that I did my discovery flight with, Aspen Flying Club, and I have numerous connections that can help me get where I want to be fairly quickly. I have no doubt in my mind that God has me right where He wants me. I will say I wish I could have actually begun flying and logging hours to work towards my private license over this last year, but high school has restricted that from happening. But really, I'm okay with that. Patience is an important lesson that I have learned and am still quite early in the process of learning. Living in the moment has not really been a mindset of mine because, well, I've had my eyes on the prize since the first day of school. And that's because I have high hopes for what's to come after this year. I really do. And although I am satisfied, I'm not proud of my work over this last year. I have yet to practice a better work ethic. I know that I can always work harder, no matter how far I have or have not gotten. There's always a way to work harder. And that is my challenge to myself as I finish out this last stretch of my senior year and proceed to pursue my passion to fly. And I'm very excited to see what the Lord has in store for my future.